Well, good evening, brothers and sisters. Welcome to Twilight Talks. Tonight we are in Matthew 24, and we're going to look at verses 29 through 31, but we are going to look at it a little bit differently. But if you don't mind, Tyler, if you'll read those verses real quick.
Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. He will send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they will gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other.
All right. For those of you who know me, I'm a big fan of looking at the history of the time. I have a problem when people 2,000 years later want to say that the events that happened in that day and time and recorded by history, in addition to what the Bible says, that the Bible and history are united, but someone anywhere between 1,500 and 2,000 years later says, oh no, they were all wrong. And you remember we talked about Josephus, and this is a site, but I've got the site up so that Tyler can read the quote from Josephus. But the only first-hand historical account we have of the destruction of Jerusalem was by a man by the name of Flavius Josephus. Josephus had actually been a Jew. He was taken captive and later converted and became a Roman citizen. The Romans beat him up and he decided, well, I'll become a Roman now. And so one of the things that Josephus, in his book, The Jewish War, or Jewish Wars, says about the sword in the sky. Tyler, if you don't mind reading the sword in the sky reference there.
And so it was, when a star resembling a sword stood over the city, Jerusalem, and a comet which continued for a year.
Yeah, no, the whole thing.
Oh, the whole thing. Yeah. Keep in mind what the shape of a sword is and how closely a sword appears to a cross. If swords and crosses are similarly shaped, then perhaps the statement by Jesus in the Olivet Discourse was fulfilled by the sign of the sword in the sky. And then from Matthew chapter 24, verse 30, then will appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then all the peoples of the earth will mourn when they see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. The Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven is a reference to the judgment of Jerusalem, which was physically manifested in the Roman army which surrounded the city and destroyed it.
All right. Now, some people go, well, the sign of Jesus is a cross. No, the sign of Jesus coming in judgment may very well have appeared in the sky like a sword. I don't care if it was a sword or a cross. The simple fact that Josephus records that a star resembling a sword stood over the city of Jerusalem, and there was a comet that lasted an entire year at the exact same time, lines up with exactly what Jesus said here. And Josephus records, if you'll read the one about the open gate, the eastern gate.
Okay. The eastern gate of the inner court, it was of brass and very massive, and when closed toward its evening, could scarcely be moved by 20 men, fastened with iron-bound bars on each side. It had bolts which were sunk to a great depth into a threshold consisting of a solid block of stone. This gate was observed at the 6th hour of the night, midnight, to have opened of its own accord. The watchman of the temple ran and reported the matter to the captain, and he came up with difficulty, succeeded in shutting it. This again, to the uninitiated, seemed the best of omens, as they supposed that God had opened to them the gate of blessings. But the learned understood that the security of the temple was dissolving of its own accord, and that the opening of the gate meant a present to their enemy, or to the enemy, interpreting the portent, sign, the same word as in the gospel, in their own minds as indicative of coming desolation.
All right, so you have that, and then just the simple fact that Titus, and I want Tyler to read this little thing about Titus. Remember, Titus was the son of Vespasian. Titus was the prince of the people that shall come that was prophesied in Daniel chapter 9. And if you'll read just these two paragraphs right there, Tyler.
Titus reportedly refused to accept a wreath of victory, saying that the victory did not come through his own efforts, but that he was merely served as an instrument of God's wrath. It is beyond amazing that Josephus, a non-believing Jewish historian, would record these signs from God that preceded the ultimate destruction of Jerusalem and the end of the Jewish age. It's also very significant that the day the temple was destroyed in AD 70 was the exact same day and month that the previous Jewish temple was destroyed.
All right. The simple fact is, the events of history at the time, the record of people who did not believe in Jesus, the record of a man who had converted away from Jewishness and became a Roman, if you can say away from Jewishness, I don't know if you can say that today, that they flat look. And remember what it said, the sun will be darker, the moon not give its light, stars. We've seen that. We saw that in Revelation, that is the language that God uses for saying the political system is going to be turned on its side. And that's exactly what happened with the death of Nero, the year of the three emperors, and then the coming of Vespasian, his son Titus against Jerusalem, Vespasian taking over Rome, and then finally Titus will become emperor of Rome, and then Domitian, and Domitian, we'll see Domitian again in the book of Revelation. That all these things, they came together just like Jesus said. And he said, well, what about verse 31? We'll get to verse 31 Monday night, because otherwise this is going to be a 25-minute video. It's supposed to be a Twilight talk, not a Twilight sermon. All right? But, and then look at Titus. Now, I'm sure Titus said it was, gods, not God. But even a historian from back then, that Titus refuses the Stephanos, the victory crown. But in Rome, if you were to go to Rome today, you could see the Arch of Titus. It is this huge triumphal arch on which is etched into stone for almost 2,000 years now everything that they plundered in Jerusalem and the slaves that they took out of it. It's all right there in stone. And even Titus says, this thing opened up and this thing was made so easy to my guys. This was from the gods. We didn't even have to fight this one. Who was the gods? The God was Jesus. Because Daniel 9 said that Messiah, the Prince, would send the people of the Prince that shall come in judgment of destruction against Jerusalem and that temple system. And this right here, verses 29 and 30, is the record of that. And so is 31, and we'll deal with 31 on Monday night. Brother, do you got any other thoughts on this?
No, sir.
All right. Have we explained it as best we can?
In as short a time frame as we're trying to keep it in, yes.
All right. And you say, well, how can I get more? Join us Sunday night at 6 o'clock as we continue our study in the book of
Revelation.
That's right, Revelation singular.
I said Revelation.
I know you did. I said that for everyone else's benefit.
It's true.
Revelation singular. We love you. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you Sunday.